Okay, here we go. This is part one of creating an entity framework core application. Let's see, from scratch. Let's do this. Let's do a new project. And it's going to be .NET Core and Core Web Application. We'll call it Demo Part 1. Looks good. No authentication for now, that's fine. Okay, good old welcome page. So the first thing we need to do is wait for these references to restore, I guess. And then we will add a couple references. So let's right click on references, manage NuGet packages. And let's go browsing. And let's look for entity framework core. Here we are. No, that's not the right one. This one right here, Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. Let's go ahead and install that. And then while that's restoring, let's scroll down and get Entity Framework Core SQL Server. Definitely going to need that. Let's go ahead and install that one as well. I'll go ahead and close this out while it's restoring. Certainly don't need this open. And now that we've got those two references, let's go ahead and add a default connection to our app settings. This is assuming that you have local DB installed. Call this connection strings. And default connection. That's server is local DB. MS SQL local DB. And our database name that we want to call it, which will be demo. Part 1 should work. And of course, this is a trusted connection. There we go. That looks good. So let's go ahead and add a folder for our models. And let's add one. Let's add a new class. And we'll just, I don't know, call it cars. How's that sound? Then we'll just give it a key, of course. Import missing references. Use ID as a key always for me. Then we'll do a couple strings, I suppose, called make. sounds good. Oh, here we go. My fingers. There we go. That looks good. I like it. And so now we can go ahead and create a context to this. I'll add another class. I'll call it my DB context. Sounds pretty good. Let's see, and of course my DB context needs to extend DB context. All right. And then we will create a CTOR. Tab after you type in CTOR will autocomplete this for you. And let's put in a DB connection options, context options. Call it options. Pass that on to the base class. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then let's create our DB set. For our cars. And I'm just going to call it cars. All right. I think that looks pretty good. And so now we will head over to our startup and do a few things. So let's start with adding the context to the configure services for our dependency injection, which we'll talk about quite a bit more later, I suppose. So services, add DB context for my DB context, and options. I use SQL Server, and of course we want to point that to our configuration. So configuration dot get connection string. Oops. Which is default connection. Looks good. Now let's move on down to the configure section here in the development section. We will go ahead and make it to where it ensures that our database is created on startup. So let's go ahead and say using service scope equals app application services dot get required service service scope factory, and then we will create scope. And now we will say our service scope dot service provider dot get service. Oops. My DB context and the database and ensure created for me. Now that looks pretty good. I think we've got all the steps down for this. Let's go ahead and let's start up SSMS. we go. And we'll connect to a database engine of, the same connection string we'd put in that app settings. Let's go ahead and connect for now. And of course I don't have any databases right now. But if we go ahead and run this guy, take a little bit longer on the first run throughs, creating the database. Alright, so we should be able to refresh this. See our database and our table with our 2 columns. Looks good. Alright, well, that ends part 1. I guess on part 2 we'll go ahead and create the views for intaking data and then show that we have data in the database.